Hello everybody, Adrian Plus here,
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
and it's number 257 in Sounding the Shallows.
Yeah, it is. And last week, of course, I think we said we were on holiday, didn't we, in Wiltshire?
We
And
were.
we also said that at the point of recording, there was black smoke coming out through that very extraordinary little chimney that indicated no decision had been made about a new pope. And by the time the recording went out, of course, the following morning, white smoke had appeared and
Yep,
there was a new pope.
yep. American by birth.
Yes, by
Which,
birth.
One of the one of these very bright top American politicians who seemed to find it very disappointing that it wasn't all for America,
Yes.
but seemed keen on looking after poor people in
That's right.
Peru.
That's right.
which is, of
And-
course,
and-
not what the Christian message is about at all, is it? I don't know.
It was a very, I don't know obviously how people felt. I know for some people just seeing all the trimmings is so off-putting they can hardly see beyond that. But I was overwhelmingly struck, not by him necessarily, although who knows, there was something really lovely in the middle of him, I thought, but it was the crowd. It really affected both of us,
Yeah,
didn't
it
it?
did.
I mean, just seeing so many people. Obviously, some people just there for a good day, but some people, there was a yearning and a loveliness, I thought, in that crowd of all ages.
It all looked kind of clean, didn't it?
It did look clean.
The passion
It
that was there.
It did, and it looked full of yearning.
Yeah.
I was very moved by it, really.
We were still on holiday when we heard the final news, weren't we?
Well,
I
we
can't
were.
remember.
Well, we were on our way home.
Yeah.
That's always the thing, isn't it?
So what would you think of our holiday now in retrospect? Well, it have to be in retrospect because
Well, I think like most holidays, when you're in the middle of them, you cannot quite make them into anything more magical than it is. You might see a beautiful view or an amazing sunset. But because, like you were saying, Adrian, about the Cardinals going in to vote, that whatever attempts they might make to be open purely to the specialness of that moment, they take themselves in there with all of their little annoying habits and prejudices and everything else, because they're human. And I think it's in retrospect you can see things. I mean, one of the things for me was, I think we may have mentioned it last week anyway, but this incredibly ancient clock that just rang a bell every hour. And both of us thought, didn't we, how trapped we are by minutes now, and how to live by the hour. So, you're only focused once an hour.
I was very taken by that. I don't know if but forgive us if we said any of this last week, but the chap who was demonstrating this ancient clock asked for questions at the end, and I just said to him, it only strikes on the hour, doesn't it? So was there some other timing mechanism or possible way of knowing what the time was when it was 13 minutes to the hour or 25 past? And I think his answer was probably in the area of saying that people weren't as concerned by the detail then as they are now, but that they knew perhaps more instinctively than we would now how far they got through the hour. I don't know. I just found that interesting because we see the time every time we open one of our machines, don't we? There it is in the corner.
And we were talking, weren't we, about how time can stretch, time can go fast, but time is not actually really connected, if we're really honest, with the minutes ticking round a clock face. But
it depends,
what's going
doesn't it?
on inside us?
Well, I mean, as one who has occasionally done night work, I can tell you that as far as I can recall, when I did that, the shift ended at 7 o'clock in the morning, I think, and the period from 6:30 to 7 lasted about 6 hours, as far as I can remember. I mean, it really was incredible how long it seemed to take for me to be able to leave the building.
Yes, yeah. And I think a lot of nurses and doctors, people working through the night in all sorts of jobs would say that, a bit of it goes, you've got plenty to do, you get on with it, and then time goes slower and slower and slower and slower. So I suppose that was one of the things I took away with me, was the idea that you were just prompted by a bell each hour. I think it was a call to prayer. And that would be quite a good way of thinking.
What did you think of the cathedral, seeing it again?
There's something about cathedrals. I mean, I remember in one of your poems, which about Winchester Cathedral, you talked about the cathedral drawing you, and then saying it always does. There's something about cathedrals that is...
Well, there is for me,
but I think there is for many, many, many people. And in that poem you talk about the whispering obeisance of secular patrols. But I think the secular patrols, people who are drawn into the cathedral simply because of its beauty and because it's mind-blowing to think of it being made at the time that it was, with none of the modern tools. And one of the things that I enjoyed hearing about on this particular occasion, and I know it applies to lots of other cathedrals, is that high up in the stonework, the stonemasons wrote little prayers because they felt they were nearer to God, but also put the names on it.
But also because
a little bit of graffiti there.
Because so I was told, or we were told, I don't know if you were there, but that the reason that they did that was because they thought they were not, didn't have the stature or the worth to pray on the same level as people down on the floor of the church.
Well, it was only really the priest
at the cathedral. So when they were up there, that's when they were able to actually talk to God through, actually writing on the, and they've retrieved a lot of those now. And of course, I do remember. I don't know if you remember, but we went once to do what is called a mission. A mission is a sort of Christian thing you go and do in a special place. I
think quite a lot of people listening to this would know what a mission was.
Anyway, we went to a cathedral, and it wasn't a particularly. It didn't have much of an atmosphere. I won't say which one it was, but it was one of the ones that was, I don't know, just didn't seem to have a lot going for it in terms of ethos and atmosphere. And I went round the cathedral eventually with a piece of paper and a pen, because I wanted to write something about the cathedral, and I wasn't sure what I would get from doing this. As it happened, I met, for instance, a woman who said, "I'm not a believer of any sort, I'm not a Christian, but I come in here to clean, and when I've done that, I go and kneel at the altar. And I just stay there for a while." And obviously it meant an enormous amount to her. And I met a young man who said, "I don't seem to be accepted anywhere else, but when I come here, they welcome me and they make me feel ashamed." So I actually collected quite a list of significant things that were happening to people there.
And I
felt a bit of an idiot, really.
I know in this particular cathedral, and I think it applies in many, it's a refuge for people who are living on the streets. It's somewhere they can come into quite early in the morning.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Some of the, I can't remember which cathedral. I know there are one or two where the heating is sort of round. So if you're sitting on those benches round the edge of the cathedral, it's quite warm.
Well, it used to be like that in
Gloucestershire.
Gloucester Cathedral, where we used to go on our day off sometimes. And when the winter was really cold, sitting on those stone benches with the heat permeating our backsides was just about heaven.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, that was so
really cathedrals have quite a lot of purposes, really.
But this cathedral, I mean, Salisbury Cathedral is very, very beautiful.
Well, it is.
I mean, the vaulted ceiling
Yes,
is
it
just incredible.
It is beautiful.
It really
Absolutely
is.
beautiful. And I was struck by one more thing before we leave this cathedral. I was struck by the fact that on the archways of the cathedral there is painting, and because of new lighting, new 2024 or whenever it was put in lighting,
Yeah.
those colours can be seen without them retouching them or just lighting them
Yeah.
and bringing
yeah.
out the colour. The idea of cathedrals being full of colour, not full of pomp, and not just places where graduates sometimes in cathedral cities go for their final whatevers, or places where it's sort of quiet, and I just love the idea of that. Yeah, really love the idea of it. So that was a really special part, and I that and the scenery, I suppose, those two. I mean, some of the trees that are around at the moment just represent the glory of God, don't they? They are so glorious.
We are in the bosomy phase in England, which I love beyond anything. I love May and June in England.
It's pretty special, not just
So
England. I think we'll
beautiful.
say the UK.
Sorry, UK. Yeah.
Well, no, but it's true, isn't
Yeah,
it? They
no,
are
that's
very,
true,
very
that's true,
gorgeous little country that's full of trees.
And I think when you're on
loveliness.
holiday, you do. Well, you still have stuff in your head, don't you? But you do take a little break from it.
Because I don't know what other people are like at the end, but because we had 4 children with us, one wonderful contrast this
Not
time.
this time, you understand.
No, I'm just
No.
going to say, this time there was just you and I
Yeah.
and the dog. And actually leaving was really quite easy, because you weren't trying to get the rest of your family to clear up their things and to
Well, that's true,
get
yeah.
to sort of get everything together in order to leave, because that was always a scramble. And yet, even whether we had them with us or not, we have actually managed to leave things in
Well,
most places we've ever travelled to, I think.
We have left, what do you call them? The things we use, the music stands we use. We've left 4 of those. One of them is in a cathedral somewhere where
Yes,
we were speaking.
That's true.
Another 3 have been left. How could we do that?
I don't
And this
know.
time, I really went round the place and looked in it.
Well, wasn't it a
And
Canadian phrase, Adrian, that
the
somebody
dumb
said
check.
called the dumb check?
Well,
So
these people
you
in
become
Canada,
the dumbest of
the
yourself.
music groups always did a dumb check at the end to make sure they'd not left anything. And
Well,
somehow,
I like that, because it means the very dumbest part of
that's
you
right,
is
yeah.
going to look
yeah.
properly at
Well, because
every corner and in
Quite
every
often,
drawer.
I've said to you, or you've said to me, I've got rid of, I've picked everything up, and you haven't. And when I've said it, I have. Anyway, this time I left my shaver behind, which is really annoying, unless it pops up somewhere. But I discovered something today which might interest you, because you probably haven't seen it for a while. But ages ago, we wrote a list of the things that we have managed to lose in the course of our travelling, or some of them.
I think this might make a lot of people feel better about themselves. But
Well,
we
they're
were travelling.
astonishing.
We were travelling a lot, weren't we, at the time?
Yeah, but
Now,
it's still
I'm
beyond
just-
belief.
Yes, I'm just saying.
I'll
we-
read you some of them, and you read some more. Right? Look,
Oh,
these.
no.
Look. Here it is.
Okay.
We have littered 6 continents with sunglasses, cameras, obviously odd socks, cricket bats,
Well, a cricket bat, anyway.
essential documents, many of them, keys, books, presents for people back home, underwear left in hotel drawers. How awful that is. Combs, bags, sweatshirts, and one interesting one was a very small teddy bear called Gregory. Wasn't there?
Belonged to our daughter, didn't it? And it caused her so much upset.
We were in a
that,
hotel in Australia.
Yeah,
weren't
we were. We were in Sydney, and we went to very complicated and expensive trouble to get him posted back home. But in fairness, Gregory still is alive
Yeah.
and still
But
lives
what
in our
was so
daughter's
amazing
house.
was how emotionally we all went into top gear, because we couldn't stand the idea that Gregory was left in Australia in a strange
You
hotel.
can't buy another bear, but it wouldn't be Gregory.
No, it wouldn't be Gregory. And in the end, he arrived by post, and Kate was able to undo the package, and there was Gregory, a much troubled teddy bear.
Bear, yeah.
Now, also,
It gets worse though, doesn't it? Because
we-
that might have felt like the worst thing that we left behind.
Oh,
but
no, no.
we've nearly lost
we
a
nearly
lot
lost
of things, haven't
all
we?
our money to thieves in Spain.
Oh well,
They set it up very carefully.
they did.
They had one car full of people who turned up next to us by the road and asked questions in Spanish. While those people were doing that, a couple of young men had picked up the thing I carried my money in and had started to walk off
Well,
with
I
it.
don't know if you remember, actually, Adrian. Just getting this clear, they said we'd got a flat tire, and they were gesturing to our car. 'Cause
Well, it started like that.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So while we were looking at the tire that they had gestured to
Yeah,
in Spanish, they
That's
ran
right,
off with
yeah.
your money bag.
but we had our 3 sons with us, and although they weren't that old, they have no fear. And one of them, I think Kate said, "That man's stolen your money."
Yes.
And all 3 of the boys started after these two young men, and I followed them, and they just stopped,
Yeah,
turned round,
they did.
and handed it back
Shrugged.
to our oldest son. Obviously, it was preferable to keeping it because they were about to be absolutely smothered by these
By
us English
plaxers.
people. And then we were. It happened again when we were back in Dover, the same holiday,
Oh,
and we got that money back too. I don't know, it was strange life really. Anyway, so lots and lots and lots and lots.
well,
of
one of
things.
my favourite things that got lost is part of your earlobe, Adrian, when we were in New Zealand. You see, we have been to a lot of countries, but we have always seemed to fall flat on our faces at one point or another. And if you remember, this was when we decided we would try fishing. We were by the most beautiful lake, weren't we?
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, Joe, our middle son, cast a cast. You know, you throw your end of your line out. A spoon, and a spoon is a large metal object with barbs attached to it, which in theory the fish are going to
Catch in their mouths.
As usual, his cast was very poor, and it caught and impaled my ear, and I can still feel it. It was like being hit by a brick in the head, even though it was and so then we had to go to the local surgery wearing this spoon.
We did.
Like a bizarre earring.
Well,
it was
and
hanging
it was.
just like an earring.
And so if you can imagine us in the car, I'm driving, Adrian's sitting next to me with this strange, bizarre earring thing. And our boys, even the one who was responsible for it, were killing themselves laughing in the back
That's
of the
right,
car.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
it did look very funny. And it didn't get any better when you got to the hospital, did it?
No, they found it hilarious that I had a beautiful fishing thingy hanging on my ear, but they did take it away. Yes, a lot of things we lost. I remember, on a more serious level, when we were visiting the border between Zambia and the Congo, and that was where the lorry drivers are stranded for weeks.
I don't think we've ever experienced such a sense of a lost land.
The
have we?
bureaucracy was appalling there, wasn't it? And this was the place where young sex workers would come out in the evening to the lorry drivers.
Can we just make the point? These young sex workers were street children who had been abandoned because their parents had died from AIDS. So before we put any labels on them,
well, that's why we call them sex workers. They had no
children.
other source of income, and there were these bored drivers who were far from home.
And let's go with that for 1 second. The drivers in this no man's land probably couldn't speak the same language as the person in the next truck, and they would be stuck there in this horrible. We talk about the phrase "God forsaken," don't we? And it did feel God forsaken.
Well, that space was dreadful.
Until we saw the World Vision workers.
And later
going in there.
we went and met the girls where they lived, which was really interesting.
Well, the girls, if you remember, were able to join a program called Sanduka, where they
That's right,
trained
yeah.
as hairdressers or cleaners or whatever to help them leave this horrible life that they really didn't want to be leaving anymore. Yeah.
And they said to us, they obviously had a very strange picture of how things are in England, because they said, we want to come and work in your house in England. And they obviously pictured some vast baronial mansion
Downton
awash
Abbey.
with servants. And it was rather sad in a way, because I think they thought their salvation might be there. So yeah, we've lost a lot of things. But going back to your saying about the people in the vast numbers of people
In the square, in the
who were
Vatican
there
Square.
when Francis was in his last hours,
And then
and when they
again
were
when
waiting
Pope
for the
Leo
new Pope to be
came
to
out
be
on the
voted
balcony.
in. That I do keep thinking about, not about the lostness in their eyes particularly, but in the way in which they had felt they were finding what they were looking for.
Which was a shepherd.
Someone who would look after them.
Yeah.
Someone who would
Yeah.
have true authority. And we were in an age, sadly, of populist politics and all the rest of it, where you have people are either bullies or morally bankrupt,
Yeah.
and searching for someone who will take over and make it okay is the deep yearning. And it may be the reason why, as we were saying, I think last week, there is a movement among many young people. We didn't really know this. We heard these statistics somewhere else. Many young people who want or are looking in the area of spirituality for something that will help to make sense of the world.
Absolutely. You know, we're talking about lost things, and you know, we were saying about how time can either drag or it can speed up or it can... Well, we use the word lost as well in very different ways. I mean, if you remember, we definitely lost the will to live in Los Angeles Airport. And I think anybody who's been to Los Angeles Airport might feel the same as us. We lost most of several meals in Bolivia, didn't we?
Yes,
We
I
really
did.
didn't cope with the food that we were...
Yeah.
I mean, it was always very generously shared with us, and then we quite generously seemed to share it with the toilet or behind a bush or whatever.
And
It
on
was
the
really
toilet
difficult.
subject in Peru, no, it wasn't in Peru. It was up in the highest point where what's the city where we landed in the
Lima?
no, not
No,
in Peru.
sorry.
It was in. It doesn't matter. But anyway, we arrived there, and
La Paz.
most of the team had diarrhea. You'll be fascinated by this. And we thought we need to go to a chemist to ask for medicine. So we found a pharmacist, and the pharmacist looked quite unconcerned and cooperative, and went up and came back with something that looked very much like a paint chart.
Right.
And on this paint chart, there were colours that ranged from bright yellow to dark green, dark brown. And it took us a while to understand what she was doing. She was asking us what colour the results of our condition were producing. That was what
Yes.
she wanted to know. And having established some sort of average view of that,
She was able
she
to
went
give
and
us some
got
tablets.
us some stuff.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
I don't think I want to think
Yeah.
about that ever again. What else? I mean, we talk. It's very easy, these losing things. You can lose confidence, can't you? I think perhaps that's something that most of us will experience at one point or
We
another.
did a very week tour in America, didn't we? Do you remember?
We did.
I mean, we've enjoyed quite a lot of things in America, but we did a tour which was run by people who had completely misunderstood where we were coming from,
Oh,
and that was really difficult.
Yeah.
Really difficult.
But I mean, there's so many things. When you made this list, Adrian, I mean, You said all our souvenirs to corrupt custom officers in Azerbaijan.
That's
well,
correct,
we were in
yeah.
Azerbaijan, weren't
Yeah,
we?
yeah,
And we bought. No, we were given a pot. And when we got to the airport, and we had to show this pot, and they said that we couldn't take it out because it was an ancient relic. And we would have to pay, if we wanted to take it out, a huge amount of money.
But as it said, made in the USSR underneath,
Yes.
we thought perhaps
Yeah.
that wasn't quite
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, a lot of loss, but we're still together, aren't we?
We are. We're still together.
Which is
we're
excellent.
still together. And
Yeah.
but I think thinking of people who've cared for us when we've lost confidence or we've lost our way or all the other things, comes back to what we saw in Vatican Square. And I really hope and pray, I really genuinely do, that those people in that square will feel they've got a good shepherd.
Yeah, I do too. I get confused about it all, but yes, we're looking for a shepherd, that's for sure.